Joining us this afternoon is Hugh O'Brian. You all know him as Wyatt Earp, but he's done stage, film, movies, TV, everything.
Marriage.
Yeah. We're
Anyway.
delighted to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
I'm very happy to be here. At 84, I'm damn happy to be anywhere.
You sound like,
So let me say it up front, I had the privilege of knowing her dad, and he was just a wonderful, wonderful man. And I'm very
Thank
proud
you.
to be here.
oh, thank you. He was a great guy.
He was.
I find it interesting that you went from being the youngest DI in the Marines to being an actor. I mean, how
I'm not
did that
really- Let me
transition?
correct you right there. I'm not really an actor, and I've got about 150 directors
Oh.
that'll tell you that.
No. I've seen your work. You are a good actor.
Thank you.
Where did you make the transition? I know you were in Santa Barbara eventually, but how did you get there from the
Well,
Marines?
actually, it started when I was in the Marine Corps, believe it or not. When we finally got Liberty, by the way, I think I mentioned earlier about smokers. Every Friday night, you couldn't get out on Liberty going through boot camp. And it's a very tough 7, 12-week period, depending on whether at peacetime or war. But they do have on Friday nights what they call smokers, which is the only entertainment you have. It's one platoon fights another platoon. And they do the selection as to who's going to do the fighting representing the platoon by putting 64 pieces of paper in a pith helmet, which is the headgear that you wore. And one of those pieces of paper would be marked boxer. And whoever picked that out represented the platoon against somebody from the other platoon. About the third or fourth week into the boot camp, I happened to pull out the one that said boxer, so I was representing my platoon. And they call them smokers because the cigarette companies, when you all came into the stadium to sit down where the ring was, they would give you anywhere from 3 to 4 6-packs of cigarettes. They were trying to hook you, and they did. And that's they gave these away. And I've always not been happy about the fact that they even allowed them to do that. But anyway, that's how they hooked you into smoking. And the fights consisted of 3 rounds, normal rounds of boxing with the intermission or timeout between the rounds. Anyway, ours was about the 4th or 5th fight that night. I got in the ring when they announced me. And the guy from the other platoon got in the ring, and I weighed about 150 pounds, streaming wet or whatever. This guy was about 6'8", Afro-American, and he weighed about 350 pounds. He was overweight. He had joined the Marine Corps. He was the tackle on the Texas A&M football team, and he joined the Marine Corps. Anyway, here's this huge giant and a skinny little runt myself. And the man in charge, the judge said, we have a guy down here making a film, and he loves the Marine Corps. Ladies and gentlemen, here's John Wayne. He's going to referee this fight. So in the ring walks the Duke. And it's the only time that I ever saw John Wayne look up at anybody, when he stood there between us looking at the tall guy and the skinny runt. And he looked at us and then he said, you guys want to fight my rules or Queensberry rules? We didn't want to argue with him, so we'll fight your rules. I said, good. And he goes by me, gives me a little wink, climbs out of the ring, picks up the gong, rings the bell, and that was it for almost 16 minutes. He figured the only chance the skinny kid could have is if he could outrun the big guy, which I did. And I just kept backing up and kept my left out. I had some experience in the Golden Gloves fighting in Chicago. Anyway, I just kept backing away, and finally this guy fell down out of exhaustion 15, 16 minutes later. I fell on top of him, and I still have this little copper bracelet to prove it. And well, the next time I saw Wayne was doing Harm's Way. Actually, I had seen him a few times before that personally, and had the privilege of going on his boat. But he remembered that fight, and he got a big kick out of telling people, how that skinny kid beat the big guy. But Wayne was a very, very special human being in
Yeah.
many, many, many ways. And he was a tough guy, but a very fair man, and he was a professional above all. He knew his lines. He knew what he wanted to do with the character. And directors really appreciated him. The last film, The Shootist, he wasn't too thrilled with the director because of a couple of things that happened. But Wayne didn't show up one day. And there were two films where this following story, two films that I was in that will tell you about this particular problem. One film with Lana Turner called Love Has Many Faces, where she couldn't come to work for a 3-4 week period. We had to go on layoff. But they have what's called a completion bond in the business. And it's one of the most important things that you have to have as a producer. That's an insurance bond that if something happens like happened on The Shootist and also Love Has Many Faces, where somebody gets ill and you can't finish the film. They can't have people go off and make another film. They got to keep you. Otherwise, you got to start all over again. In the case of Wayne, he didn't show up one day. Next day, he didn't show up. Directors started to start shooting around him. And then we realized that he was really probably quite ill. And the problem is that we all knew that he only had one lung at that time. So it was really iffy if he was ever going to come back. But they shot all of Lauren Bacall's close-ups, quite a few of the other scenes without him being there. How many of you have seen The Shootist? How many? Okay. Wow, great. The shootout, the last gunfight, in which the Wayne comes in and takes on the three gunfighters, the three people in the room. We shot that whole thing without him being there. And it was really the director's point of view, how to do it. And if you remember, the first kid, the Tom Braggart, is the first one to get off a shot. When you see the cut version, Wayne goes to the bar, turns around with his back to us, the three people at the tables, myself, Richard Boone, and this Tom Braggart. The Tom Braggart is the first one to get off a shot, and he shoots Wayne in the back, shoulder. Wayne jumps over the bar. The kid panics, throws his gun down, runs out, and in the stuff that was shot by the director without Wayne being there, got shot in the back. Day that Wayne finally did come back, we only shot for a half a day. The director said, we're happy to have the man back. We're going to shoot half a day. We're going to show him all the rushes. And Duke turns to me and says, hey, kid, come on, let's go look at the rushes. And he took me with him. And we got to the sequence of the gunfight. And in the sequence, you see the kid take the shot, throw his gun down, and run out, and he gets shot in the back. Wayne stands up there, hey, wait a goddamn minute. I never shot anybody in the back. I ain't going to start now. You redo that scene, and you get another boy. He was a tremendous
Good for him.
character. I loved working with him, and he was a wonderful human being, and I think a great American.
Yes.
And he loved the Marine Corps, sir.
Wasn't Ida Lupino sort of
Yeah, she was
important in your early career?
She's the first person that gave me a major role. My first film, actually, was with a guy by the name of Gene Autry, and Beyond the Purple Hills. And they put me in that so that I could learn about Western saddle.
Oh,
I knew how to ride and had, as a kid, learned how to ride, but English saddle. How many of you have ever ridden Western saddle? Well, we got a lot of falsettos out there. The difference, obviously, is the horn in the front.
And I gotta tell you, the first time you learn how to do it, you gotta be careful.
well, you made a lot of Westerns, so obviously you learned to do it pretty
By the
well.
way, I got to tell you this. You finish the story about completion bond and the money it cost for the insurance. Love Has Many Faces. We're down in Acapulco. Lana Turner, and the costume artist was Edith Head. She didn't come to work one day. This is about 5 or 6 weeks into the film. And then the next day, she didn't come in. The third day, they were very concerned about symptoms that they saw, so they flew her from Acapulco back to Los Angeles. And she went into the hospital, and she was in the hospital for about 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks.
Wow.
And we, in Acapulco, shot everything we could without her being there. And then there was no more to do without her, so we just sat there. But we were all paid sour, the producer, the director, and they couldn't let us go because they had to finish the film. And that is what a completion bond does. It's an insurance policy. It's very expensive, but it does take care of paying the people when the show's down. Lana came back. We were all, so happy to see her. She was a wonderful, wonderful lady. I got to tell you this because I first met her when I was a soda jerk at Schwab's drugstore on Crescent Heights and Sunset Boulevard. And I used to do whatever I could to make a buck when I was in the Marine Corps and had a few days off. And one of the things is that during the day I would park cars, and at the evening time I'd go wait at the counter at Schwab's drugstore. And she, when we first met, she said, "I know you from someplace. What do I know you?" And I said, "Well, I was a soda jerk." She said, "That's it. You made the best sodas that anybody made."
Always have to be the best, huh?
But anyway, when she did come back, she got into costume and came on the set. She was not very big to begin with. She was about 105 pounds, 110. And this dress that she was wearing was like it was falling off of her.
Wow.
And so we had to cut down again, and she had to go back to Los Angeles again and have Edith Head redo the whole wardrobe. So
Oh,
you can
wow.
imagine that. Anyway, onward and upward.
She named her daughter after me.
Really?
Yeah, Cheryl.
Poopy doo?
I didn't know her as that, but evidently she liked the name that Dad had picked out, so she named her
You asked
daughter
me
after
about
me.
getting into the business in the first
Yeah.
place. It happened when I was in the Marine Corps. When we did have time, started getting liberty after I was a drill instructor, went up to the obvious place. Where would you go? Hollywood, and I went to the Hollywood Canteen. And that was a marvelous opportunity to see what the USO does. And how many people out there were in service? Please raise your hand. Please
Yeah.
stand up. Everybody give them a great big hand. Come on.
Oh, yeah.
Stand up. Thank you. Anyway, the Hollywood Canteen on Vine Street. And I guess it was the second or third Liberty. I was standing in line. A lady came up to me, and she said, "How would you like to represent the Marine Corps on the blind date program?" I said, "Well, what is that?" And she said, "Well, it's a radio show, and my name is Arlene Francis." And it turned out that Arlene Francis was the hostess of this, at that time, famous radio show. And the blind date program consisted of having a starlet or a star, a lady who would be sitting on the other side of the curtain, and a big panel in the middle separating the four servicemen from the lady who was going to be the blind date. And what they would do is ask you a question, each in order, and then you gave the question at the end. The starlet or the star, in this case, it turned out to be Virginia Mayo, asked the tough questions. What happened in terms of my winding up doing that is that about, I guess it was about 2 or 3, 4 weeks after this lady came up to me in line at the USO, my drill instructor, my colonel, called me in the office and said, "Sergeant," I was sergeant by that time, he said, "I've got an offer here for you to do the blind date program." And I said, "Well, what does that mean, sir?" He said, "That takes place on a Tuesday night. That means I've got to give you 3 or 4 days off in order to go up to Hollywood to do that. But you want to do it? You want to represent the Marine Corps?" I said, "Well, yeah, why not? My God, 4 days off, that's unheard of." So I said, "Yes, Said, Sergeant, give Sergeant Crampy, my real name is Crampy, K-R-A-M-P, give him a 4-day pass, whatever it was. And he said, yes, sir. I get to the door and he said, Sergeant, and I said, yes, sir. He said, if you don't win, don't come back. Anyway, we went and did the show, and there was Army, Navy, Coast Guard, Marine. And it was a series of questions that this lady, you didn't know who she was, that turned out to be Virginia Mayo, would ask you. And you had little 4x5 cards with these supposed clever answers. They didn't think that you could dream up of anything, so they had it all written out. And finally, the last question came, and we did them in order. It was now Army first, Navy, Coast Guard, and then the Marine was the last one to give an answer. So the question was, why do you really want a date with me? So the Army was first, the Navy, Coast Guard, and then she got to me. She said, Marine, why do you really want a date with me? And I looked at this little card with this dumb answer. And I said, because, ma'am, if I don't win, I can't go back to the base. And she said, Marine, you got it. You're it. And they took us to the Coconut Grove at the Ambassador Hotel. This is back in 1943. Any of you have been to LA, that was downtown. I mean, that was like Beverly Hills. And they took us to the, I'll think of it in a minute. But it was a beautiful, beautiful room. And Tommy Dorsey was the orchestra, okay? And I'm sitting there with my little khaki outfit on, and this gorgeous, gorgeous Virginia Mayo. Beautiful blonde. She was the Marilyn Monroe
Of the
those
time,
days.
sure.
Anyway, she said, what would you like to drink? And I said, a beer. And she said, have you ever tried a brandy Alexander? And I said, no. And she said, well, you're going to have one. So she gave me brandy Alexander. About 3 of them later, I was dancing with her.
I bet.
That it was quite something. And when we all left, it was called the Coconut Grove. That's what it was called. And we all went back in the limo back to her. They took me back to the Y or whatever it was, and she went on home. And she said, why don't you, are you free tomorrow? Can you come for lunch to the studio? And I said, well, I'm free. She said, why don't you come when you can get there, anytime after 9:30, 10, and stick around and we'll have lunch together. I said, well, gee, that'd be great. So anyway, I went to the studio, Gowan Studio, and went to the gate. I sent a guy out to pick me up and took me into the studio where they were filming. They happened to be doing a big, huge production number with all the Goldwyn girls. These are the 12 most beautiful, beautiful girls you ever saw in your life. And they were doing this big number where they came down the stairs with these big, big, huge
Oh, yeah.
hats on.
Remember those?
And the film was Wonder Man with Danny Kaye. And they did the shot, and then she came over and she brought over the Goldwyn girls, and I met each one of them. And one of them became particularly friendly. Her name was Karen X. Gaylord from Minnesota. And she said, what are you doing for dinner? And I said, well, why don't you come to where we live? All of us live in the same boarding house. Okay, so they took me to this boarding house, which was at the corner of DeLong Prairie and Sunset Boulevard. Very, very close to Cyril's at the time. And this is the old Wally Reed mansion. Wally Reed was a big silent film star. So this had about, I guess, about 10 bedrooms, swimming pool, tennis court, garage that was big enough for 6 cars. It was a huge mansion. And a lady by the name of Marie Cody was the house mother. She had rented the place or somehow bought it or whatever, and she used it as a boarding house. As I said, all the Goldwyn girls lived there, 2 to 3 girls to a room. And one way or the other, on evenings, most of them had dates. But that particular evening, Karen asked me if I'd like to stay around for dinner. And I said sure, and I stayed there and met the rest of them. Among them, Linda Christian, who married Tyrone Power, the 2 Eden sisters, One married Howard Hawks and the other married, can't remember the name now. And a gal by the name of Ruth Roman, who, that's another story. But anyway, I went back to the base, wound up with a fleet appointment in the Naval Academy, went back east, and one way or the other, decided I didn't want to spend 30 years in the service. So I had 4 years of GI Bill coming to me, so I decided I wanted to be an attorney, so I enrolled at Yale. This was March, and I had until September to do something with my time. I decided to hitchhike out to Los Angeles and try to earn enough money to buy a car to take to Yale. First night I spent at the YMCA. Second day I decided to go say hello to people at the House of Seven Gables. And Marie Cody met me at the door, and she said, "Hey, hi, Huey, come on in, you're just in time for lunch." And I sat there, and about 5 or 10 of the girls came down, and their hair up, and kimonos and so forth. And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm out of the car." And she said, "Well, what are you going to do now?" "I'm going to earn enough money to buy a car." And she said, "Where are you staying?" I said, "Well, the YMCA." And she said, "Why don't you stay here?" I fired our gardener a couple of days ago. "You take care of the lawn, you take care of the pool, and I'll give you free rent and board." Okay. So I wound up living there with 24 of the most beautiful girls in the
Yeah.
Needless to say, I lost a lot of weight.
My dad always said it's better to be lucky.
Anyway, one of the gals there was
Wow.
doing a little theater work, and I started dating her. She was just a beautiful gal. And if I wanted to see her, I had to go to rehearsals and pick her up. About the fourth rehearsal, the leading man didn't show, and the director said, "Why don't you read the script?" And since he's not here. I said, "Well, what would I do?" He said, "Well, first of all, turn it right side up so you can read it." And when your name comes up, after that person before you says something, then you say the next line. Anyway, I did that for about 2 rehearsals. And the third rehearsal, they realized the guy had his appendix out or something, so the director said, "Why don't you do the role?" I said, "I wouldn't know that." "What do you mean? I wouldn't even know what to do." He says, "It's not that difficult. First you learn the lines, then you say them loud enough so they can hear you in the back row. And third, don't bump into the friggin' furniture." So that was the only direction that I ever had. We opened, it was a little theater, there were 20 or so of them around town at that time. This particular show, that evening, the head drama theater writer on the LA Times decided to come to this particular theater to do a story on what was happening with all these 20 or 30 little theaters around the city. And he went back and he gave my gal, the gal I was dating, a tremendous review. And I was also part of the good things about the review. It was just tremendous. So she was thrilled and excited, and he had invited her to come down and have lunch with him. So she said, "Why don't you come with me?" I did. And he asked her where she got her training and so forth, and she went on. And he said, "Hugh, where did you get your training?" I said, "Sir, I've never done this before. It's the first thing I ever did." He said, "Well, you have a natural ability and you have a good, strong voice. You ought to take a look at it. It's a lot of fun if you make a buck at it." So I did a more advanced show the next time. I wound up doing a show that Ida Lupino saw, to get back to you. And Ida Lupino came backstage and said she would like to have me read for her. And the next day, I went to her home, which is about a little over 1.5 miles from where I live now, up on the top
wow.
of Mulholland. And I came in the room, and she handed me a script, and she said, "I want you to take a look at this, and let me know when you're ready." And I crossed the scene here. This is the scene I'd like you to read with me. And I took that script and memorized every single word, whether it was my part or somebody else's part. It took me quite a while, but I did memorize it. So when she asked me to read for her, I knew exactly what the lines were, and I knew I didn't have to just read it. I mean, I knew what it was supposed to be. But I didn't say that I'd memorized. So when I finished, she put the script down, and she looked at me and she said, "Hugh, that is the greatest cold reading I've ever heard. And you have the role." And that was the beginning of it. And she was just a great mentor and a wonderful lady. And the role happened to be of a paraplegic. And I don't know if you ever saw it, but I went and got a wheelchair, and at least 5 hours a day practiced in that wheelchair. Then I started playing basketball out of that wheelchair, which is part of one of the scenes. I could do spins on that. I could do one-legged or one-wheel turns, but that became kind of part of my entree, if you will. Whether it was riding a horse, whether it was working with a sword, whatever is called for in a film, I was able to do it, or I would practice until I could actually do it, but they wouldn't necessarily have to have a stuntman. It was a great, fun, wonderful business. I was on a contract at Universal for about 3 or 4 years. Bunch of wonderful guys, Rock Hudson, Audie Murphy, Tony Curtis, Jeff Chandler, Piper Laurie. It was just a tremendous 3 years. And then I did 3 films in a row at 20th Century Fox, one of which was with my favorite man of all time, Spencer Tracy. The third film I did, when I came back, and I did 2 others after that, they took me to my dressing room, and it was Spencer Tracy's dressing room.
Oh.
Wow. Can you imagine how you would feel if you were suddenly given Spencer Tracy's dressing room to use?
Oh, that would be
Forget the money.
tremendous. Wow.
That was just great. Anyway, after that, quite a few films at MGM. I got to know a gal by the name of Debbie Reynolds quite well. Debbie's one of my dear pals. And we met some function, and then we started seeing each other maybe once every week or 2. But just friends, never, at night, take her home and give her a little peck, and she'd run up the stairs, and that was it. One night, she said, "I need your help." I said, what can I do for you? She said, "I'm doing this film called Singing in the Rain with Gene Kelly. And then we have to do a movie kiss at the end of this one scene." She said, I don't know how to do it. Can you show me?" So we went home that evening, sat in my old 38 Plymouth Coupe. And I said, "Now, first of all, when we kiss, do not close your eyes like you do when you kiss me goodnight. And don't pucker up." She said, "Okay, what should I do?" I said, "Come into the kiss, looking me in my eyes like you really want it, and just leave your lips very moist." So we practiced about a couple hundred times. Anyway, finally got to the point where she felt comfortable. But 3 weeks later, 2 weeks later, whatever it was, they did this scene. And at the end of it, Gene Kelly takes her in his arms, kisses her, and it's a very beautiful, beautiful, warm moment. So now they go to shoot it. And Debbie said, "One time, sir," meaning to the director, "one chance. I don't want to have to do this again." So everybody was very much aware that they were only going to have one shot of this with Kelly kissing her. They do the scene, everything is fantastic. The dialogue, the camera, the lighting, the whole bit. They get to this scene, he takes her in his arms. And about 3 or 4 seconds into it, she pulls back. He had tried to stick his tongue down her throat. MGM is famous for saving old shots of
Outtakes.
Outtakes like that. And that's one of the outtakes of being very famous. About a week or 2 weeks later, whatever it was, Debbie invited me to MGM on the set to see them shoot, and introduced me to Gene Kelly. It was about 10 o'clock, whatever it was. Came time for lunch, and he said, why don't you two guys have lunch with me? Let me take you to lunch. So Debbie and I went to lunch with Gene Kelly. And we were sitting there and talking and everything. And finally, after about 20 minutes, he looks over at me and he said, Hugh, I know you from someplace. How do I know you? I said, well, sir, I do your lawn. I had, when I got out of the Marine Corps, little cards made up that said exterior decorator on it, which is a fancy word for a guy that pushed a lawnmower. And by the time I had gone under contract at Universal, I had about 40 guys working for me. And when I went under contract, I sold that business for around, I guess it was around $50,000 at the time, which today would be like about $4 million. But it's been a great life, and I've had a great many experiences. And I'm very, very proud of still being able to function enough to get my program, my youth program, out there in front of everybody. And there isn't one person in this room that school is not represented, at least I believe so. We have about 98% of all high schools that select their outstanding 10th graders. That's in the process of selection right now in every public and private high school. They select what they consider to be the top 10th grader. Grade points have nothing to do with it. I'm not knocking grade points, but what I'm looking for are the outstanding 10th graders that have the eyes and ears of their classmates. You take a look at the Fortune 500. I don't think you'll find one president or CEO that had straight A's. B's, maybe an A or two, some C's, but they all had one thing in common, and that is they had the ambition to get to the top. And that is what I'm looking for, because that individual is going to be the leader in this country in the future. And we cover international trade, marketing, retailing, space, energy. No speeches, panels, 3 to 6 people on a panel, no matter what the subject is. If there are only 3, one of them has to be a woman. If there's 6, 2 have to be ladies that are experts in that particular subject. School selects what they consider to be that leader. That student goes to one of the 85 Hobie sites around the country. Delaware, Rhode Island, Wyoming can get all their 10th graders into one location. But when you get over 200 10th graders in the room, the energy level will blow you out of it. So the majority of states have to have 2, 3, 4. In case of New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, California. There are 5 sites geographically where the students will be going to that program in the spring. And it is a 3 to 4 day program. Any of you that have friends that have sophomores or upcoming sophomores, please have them look at the website, Hobie, HOBY.org. There's nobody out there being paid. It's a private sector initiative. And my friends, I got to tell you, I can't tell you how important it is in my life, and I believe so in yours. Think about it. The future of this country depends on the generation that's coming up now. And we've got to reach out and put our arms around them. So this is a very cost-effective way to do that. Now, if you happen to have a sophomore that's a grandson or granddaughter, and they're going to say to you, why would I want to go to this program? I've been in school all week. Why do I want to go to school over the weekend? It's not a school. But the cincher and the easy way to get them excited about or interested, say, because you're going to meet the most beautiful girls in the whole state of California. That's it. And then, oh, okay, I'll go. Anyway, we have time for questions?
Yes, we do. Please. We'll take questions. Yes, sir.
And I was a fan of your TV series, Wyatt Earp. I thought it was a little interesting. You haven't mentioned anything about that. I was really fascinated by the stuff you did tell us about, but I was wondering if there's some reason why you don't seem to be as interested in your history there as with the other things you've done.
Well, the money's in the bank. Thank you, sir. I consider myself very, very fortunate to have been given the role. The man that was the expert and who wrote the book on Wyatt Earp. His name was Stuart Lake. Stuart was also a Marine, and he was a great writer. And I think one of the reasons I got the role was because I was a Marine. And if you go back and look at that series, there's some Marine in that character. Not shave the head and bang him in the butt type thing, but in terms of integrity, his willingness to get the job done, and he was about as straight and narrow as you can get. By the way, many people came on the set that actually knew Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp died on 13th Street in 1929. So when we started the show in 54, there were quite a few people that were still living. And one of them that came on the set was the wildest and the weirdest of all. His name was Al Jennings. Al Jennings was known as the Great Train Robber. And Wyatt is the one that put him into Leavenworth. But this guy comes on the set one day and introduces himself to me. He's about 5'3", 5'4", about the same size as Mickey Rooney. Very, very thin. And he introduced himself. And I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Leavenworth." And the head of the prison let him out on the good behavior. He was about 88 at the time, something like that.
Wow.
He'd been in there for 50-some years, so they let him out, and he came out to see his old friend Wyatt Earp. And he actually thought that I was Wyatt, and that I was still living or whatever I was doing. And he stayed there for about 2 or 3 days. And he finally came up to me and said, "Wyatt, this is such bullshit. I'm going back home." And I said, "Nobody ever got off 25, 30, 50 rounds of ammunition a day. And it's not right, because when you do shoot them, and they get up again." Anyway, immediately I had a concern. I mean, here was a very, very, very nice guy. I said, "Al, where are you going home to?" He said, "The only home I know is Leavenworth." I said, "And how are you going to get there?" And he looked at me and said, "You must think I'm pretty damn stupid. I got a ticket on Greyhound." And he reached in. He had a return ticket. So I reached in my pocket and took out a few bills, about $100 or so, and I gave it to him. "I don't want it." I said, "No, I want you to have a good couple meals on me. You just think of old Wyatt and have some good food on your way back." "Okay, Wyatt, fine." So the next day I started thinking about it. Can you imagine this guy coming and knocking on the prison door saying, "I want to come back in"? What's the warden going to say? So I picked up the phone, found the phone number, and called Leavenworth. And after about 3 or 4 calls, I finally got through to the warden's office. And he finally took the call. He said, "Wyatt Earp, what the hell do you want with me?" And I said, "Well, sir, we've just had a great visitor here. His name was Al Jennings." He said, "Al Jennings, God, he's the best inmate we've ever had." I said, "Well, he's coming back." He said, "You're kidding." I said, "No, sir, he's on his way." By God, that's the best news I've ever had.
Oh.
He is the greatest baker that we've ever had. So Al comes knocking on the door 3 or 4 days later. The warden takes him into the warden's home with his family. Gave him his own bedroom. And about midnight, 1 o'clock every morning, they'd come get him, take him into the bakery. All of you know anything about baking. It's done in the early morning hours, so you have fresh bread the next day. And they made him the head baker and he was there for about another 4 or 5 years before he passed away.
Oh,
But
great
that's one of the
story.
great stories about,
Oh, yeah.
all those guys had a lot of fun things to say.
Oh, that's a wonderful story. Yes, sir?
This is the Western Film Festival. Is there any chance that the cowboy movie genre will return?
I wish I could say yes. I think the only thing we got going for us right now is the Western Channel. It just doesn't attract young people at this point. I can't tell you exactly why, except that they've been raised on violence. That's what they want to see, or that's what they expect to see. There's just not enough action in a Western film. That doesn't mean that one of them, couldn't be made. But I got to tell you, it's not going to be a big blockbuster type of film where they put a lot of money into it. But it may come around in due time. I hope to God it does, but I think it's going to still be a while. But those are the basic financial reasons why they're not being made.
Yeah. Yes, sir?
I wanted to know, do you have any stories or little tidbits from the movie Twins that you did with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito?
Well, we were all pretty horny.
You just did that so I'll blush.
Actually, it was one of the most fun experiences I ever had. It's the first time that Danny worked with Arnold, and Arnold worked with Danny, and that I worked with either of them or whatever. And I had met Schwarzenegger before, but we just had an awful lot of fun doing that. And it was a very interesting film to make. I was very proud to be in it. It obviously did, quite well. And it's amazing how it's helped me in some ways, because when I'm talking to a new person or trying to get an appointment or whatever, I would say, "This is the father of Arnold Schwarzenegger." Anyway, he's a good guy, and of course his wife, when you get Arnold, you got 2 for 1, okay? Because his wife is something else, Maria.
Yeah.
And of course, that's part of the Kennedy family. And she just lost Ted, and of course, her personal family just lost their mother. But I think he's doing a great job, by the way. I really do. And I have a lot of fun saying that I'm his father. Anybody in?
Way back there.
I wonder, did you ever do any work with Randolph Scott?
No, but I admired him greatly. I thought he was a great guy. He did a wonderful job whenever he... the people that I got to know, the so-called top of the list type guys, Cary Grant, Clark Gable to an extent, Spencer Tracy, wow. Jimmy Stewart, got to know Jimmy pretty well. And trying to think of a couple of others. Widmark. One way or the other, I got to know some of the greats. And that was kind of the fun of being in the film beginning in the early 50s, late 40s. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You was in a movie with Audie Murphy and Walter Brennan.
Yeah. And Audie was quite a guy. Audie was under contract in Universal. And by the way, when I did Wyatt Earp, one of the gimmicks, one of the things I thought would be important to learn and do and be able to really handle was the quick draw. And bottom line, I practiced 1,000 hours in front of a mirror during the quick draw. Got it to the point where I could outdraw the guy that was in the mirror. But I remember when they started coming out with the stories about the fastest man in the West, and this guy can actually draw, cock, and fire under 2 seconds, which was supposed to be pretty good. And Audie Murphy, a good friend, Audie challenged me to a quick draw contest. We almost did it, except he insisted on the fact that we use live ammunition. He wasn't kidding. Audie was a little bit awkward. Like, yeah. But he was a very, very, very good guy, and of course, one of our great heroes, World War II.
There
Somebody
was
else.
a lady with
Is
a
there any
question.
lady?
Yes, there.
Who is the best actor or actress you ever worked with?
Well, Ida Lupino certainly was. I never did a film with her, but she was terrific. I'm trying to think. Tracy certainly was one of the most wonderful. Jimmy Stewart. I would have to name those two. Chuck Heston. Chuck and I went to the same high school together, New Trier High School in North Shore of Chicago. But I never worked with anyone that wasn't good, let's put it that way. I had the good fortune of working with tremendous people. Another question?
Yes, sir?
You mentioned the Duke's illness during the filming of The Shootist. Did that affect his morale, his mood? Was he maudlin at that time, or how was
I'm
his
sorry, I
reaction?
understand.
He wanted to know how Wayne's health affected his mood or whatever during the shootist.
When he came back to do the final stuff on The Shootist, you wouldn't know that he'd been sick. He didn't act it. You couldn't tell. I never saw the man look ill or active. Anybody else? Must be somebody else.
Did you ever date Marilyn Monroe?
Now that question you heard.
Excuse me, did I ever do what to her?
Date Marilyn.
Would you spell it, please? Not what you would call dating. But we got to know each other very, very well, and I considered her a very dear friend. I first met Marilyn on a film called No Business Like Show Business. And one way or the other, we became friends. And then I wound up doing a film for 20th called Saskatchewan. We were up in Banff, Canada. And Alan Ladd was the lead. I played the heavy in that film. At the same time we went up there to film, about 2 weeks later, another team came up doing a film called River of No Return with Rory Calhoun and Marilyn Monroe. And we stayed at the Banff Hotel. And the first meal that she had there when she came in, she and I shared it together. We were happy to see each other, whatever. We were good friends. And then we would have breakfast together almost every morning when we had early calls. We'd wind up and have breakfast together, and other people with us too. One or the other, a good friendship. About the fourth or fifth, sixth morning, she came down, she was a little bit late, and she looked like she'd been hit by a truck. And she really looked out of it. And I said, "Did you get any sleep?" She said, "Not much, I'm just so whacked out." I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "Starting at about 10 or 11 at night, there's knocks on my doors. Somebody hoping, that I'll open the door and let them in. And then they'll go away and come back, somebody will come back an hour later, knock on the door." She said, "It's just very hard for me to get any sleep." So I said, "Okay, well, don't worry about it, let me take care of it." So that night, I made a little sign about that big, and I put it on the door. I said, do not knock on this door. If you do, I'm going to come get you. Hugh O'Brien, Wyatt Earp. Bottom line, nobody ever knocked again.
That's a great story.
You know, she was a very, when I say simple, I don't mean that in any other than a nice way. She was just a very warm, human lady. She was going at that time with Joe DiMaggio. And that was a very warm and very lovely, friendship. Thank you for your time, and I wish we...
Thank you so much.